I want to read something that I find just as appalling and dangerous, and that is what the Washington Post has consistently been doing. What the Washington Post has consistently been doing is trying to kind of compare Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump and equate Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump. Thank you, PJ Coin, 10 euros. Workers vote. Thank you, thank you. This is a super chat too, so GoFundMe, super chat, whatever you prefer. So let's read along for just a little bit, because what the Washington Post is trying to do is try and persuade its readers, which mostly older establishment, that Bernie Sanders is, kind of, he's got different policies, but he's basically Trump with his scorched earth campaign, they call it, against the media. This from the Washington Post. One scorching Saturday afternoon in July, some 70 supporters of Bernie Sanders crammed into a community room at a library here for one of the campaign's organizing sessions. The event, a reunion fraught with both anger and nostalgia for the last presidential cycle, was just a few miles from where the senator's supporters had erupted during the state's contentious 2016 party convention. "We were not defeated, we were cheated," shouted one woman from the back of the room. "Who's a little bit angry? Who's ready to work?" a campaign staffer asked the crowd. Questions met with raucous applause. Among those shouting loudest was Marcia Armstrong, a 63-year-old who lives in nearby Henderson and works in customer service for a property management company. She said she was trying to find some positivity and motivation in her frustration, but others, who believed the electoral process was rigged by the Democratic National Committee 3 years ago, were less optimistic. Quote, "I think they're just fed up with the whole system, and some of them feel that nothing can be done to change it. I disagree," she said. "I try to be positive." In 2016, Sanders and his supporters shared a visceral anger at the nation's economic and political systems, which they contend had been corrupted by wealthy capitalists. Hillary Clinton proved the perfect foe for an anti-establishment campaign. But with a sitting president who has also used anger to galvanize his base and claims to represent the antithesis of the Washington elite, some now find that aggressive messaging unappealing. Here is exactly what I'm talking about, folks. This is the complicity that tries to prop up corporate power, and in the Washington Post case, try and paint those fighting corporate theft, corporate greed, corporate barbarism as somehow dangerous. This is, if you want to say reverse psychology, I think that would be a charitable definition. Here's what they're saying. "Oh, but like a sitting president who's used anger to galvanize his base. Some now find Bernie Sanders' aggressive messaging is unappealing. And what is complicit and subtle, well, not subtle, in this messaging?" So what's complicit in this is the Washington Post trying to tell its viewers, on one side is somebody calling Mexicans drug lords, rapists, and criminals. On one side is calling for a ban of Muslims. On one side is saying grab women by the genitals, whether they like it or not. On one side is somebody calling, women they don't like fat pigs. On one side is basically calling, immigrants, they're stealing your jobs. Immigrants are, bad hombres. Calling Mexican judges, not possible to be unbiased. So that anger, which by the way is not anger, that's called racism. A lot of it's built on economic insecurity, which is real, but a lot of it's also built on racism. They're trying to compare that anger, with trying to provide universal health care for all people, trying to provide essentially universal education. Everybody goes to college, public college, for free. Trying to save the planet from, carbon dioxide and methane, melting the rest of the ice caps and basically flooding us all out. Trying to, maybe give workers like a little more than crumbs, maybe $15 an hour, maybe, some benefits that are stable, maybe some resources like a labor union so they're not exploited and demolished. To the Washington Post, that anger is the same. The anger that I described under President Trump, what's so different about that? And the anger from Bernie Sanders. And we've seen this before from the Washington Post. This from one of their columnists a few months ago. Bernie Sanders has emerged as the Donald Trump on the left. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up, but you don't have to. Because what this is, and I'm not going to name names, but I know people even in my life that are good people. I enjoy spending time with them. My family, people I know that are older than I, and they read the Washington Post and they read the New York Times and they watch MSNBC or CNN, and I love them, good people, but they're just brainwashed with this same rhetoric to say, oh, Bernie's unrealistic, oh, stop the yelling, and frankly, he comes off angry, his tone, and frankly, most of those people don't have a lot of anger themselves economically, because most of those people are the winners in this Hunger Games society. Not that they didn't work hard themselves to get to where they are, but they're not feeling the economic squeeze. They haven't had the money stolen from them, from the elites. So they're feeling quite comfortable. Ironically, most of those people live in coastal cities like New York City, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Los Angeles, a lot of wealthy folk in Chicago. So when the Washington Post does this, and by the way, it's not just the Washington Post. Obviously, we focus on the Washington Post because they do it the most out of anyone. But when the Washington Post does this, what they're trying to do is make economic populism and economic anger, not anger at Mexicans, not anger at Muslims, not anger at immigrants, anger at this. Anger at this. What this is in front of you, folks, is barbarism. Because what's not shown on this chart is all the people in this corporation masquerading as a country that are sleeping on the streets. They're not showing you all the people, 21 to even 35 or 40, living with their parents right now. They're not showing you all the people that I've met on the road that could barely even talk when I asked to interview them because they're running to their third or fourth job. They're not showing you the people rationing their insulin, rationing their antidepressants, rationing their medicine, either for life-saving medical illnesses or life-saving mental illnesses. And I got an interview to show you in a little bit with a son, a 29-year-old, who died by killing himself because his health insurance, his for-profit health insurance company, discontinued his medication over a $20 bill. $20 unpaid bill. You're off. We're discontinuing your health care. He didn't know. He went to go fill his health insurance, his medication for his depression and psychosis. Your health insurance kicked you off. Call them. Call. Oh yeah, you didn't pay your $20 bill, so now you gotta wait. He's like, all right, I'll pay it right now. He pays it on the phone. Okay, you'll be effective May 1st. That's in 3 weeks. What am I going to do till then? Sorry. Well, if you have a mental health issue, sometimes it's severe enough that if you're not on medication for even a few days, you start to get down or you start to get up or whatever it is. Depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, you name it. Well, Danny got so down that he glued his seatbelt to himself and he drove into a river. Killed himself. All over $20. And I have an interview with his father in a little bit I'll show, who Kamala Harris exploited the suicide of his son to pretend she is going to provide universal health care, even though she's going to do no such thing. No such thing. And the reason it keeps happening, make no mistake about it, is because places like the Washington Post are gaslighting America. I want to read a little bit more of this Washington Post story because it's so ridiculous. But this is what's passing as journalism today. And by the way, just so you know, I would have absolutely no problem, none at all. I'd have no problem at all if the Washington Post just came out and said, listen, we are the paper of the establishment. We believe in centrism or, left of center politics. That's where we stand. We believe corporations are a good thing. We believe in capitalism, and we are not for Bernie Sanders. However, we want to give all sides a voice, but that's where we stand. That's fine. Then you can write as many nasty things you want about Bernie Sanders, as long as everybody who's reading it knows that's what it is. But when the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN are doing, and MSNBC are doing propaganda, well, and pretending to be neutral, then, gullible, susceptible people that are reading and watching think, oh, well, maybe this Bernie Sanders is a little angry. He's too angry. Or maybe these ideas are very radical. They're not. And you know what? The reason the writers at the Washington Post aren't angry economically is because they're doing just fine to write their propaganda. The reason that I find this so egregious is, the Washington Post, in this propaganda that they continually put out, is trying to make somebody fighting against the gross theft of our money, the gross auction off of our government, as equivalent or somehow, mirroring a fascist bigot. During a spat between Sanders and Congressman Tim Ryan on the debate stage in July over how to best curb greenhouse gas emissions, Ryan's told the senator from Vermont, "You don't have to yell." Ryan's campaign was quick to use the moment as a marketing ploy with new stickers. "You don't have to yell. Tim Ryan 2020. Yeah, I'm sure that's working out for Tim Ryan, who's still polling, I think, at 0 or 1%. For voters who yearn for the institutional change Sanders shepherded during the 2016 campaign, but are turned off by his tenor, there are now options. Interview with dozens of Democratic voters in Washington, California, New Hampshire, and Nevada showed that many former Sanders loyalists are now playing the field for their 2020 vote. Jonathan Aaron, a 34-year-old software engineer from Seattle, who supported Sanders in 2016, felt cheated when the DNC gave the nomination to Clinton. Now Sanders is back on the campaign trail, but Aaron no longer stands behind him. "I just feel that Elizabeth Warren is more of a better understanding of it all," he said of the Massachusetts Democrat, as he perched not far from the stage where Warren would soon address 15,000 rally-goers at a park in Seattle, her biggest event to date. Sanders beat Clinton in the Washington caucus by nearly 50-point margin. The two senators from New England, longtime pals who share a common enemy in Wall Street, find themselves more similar than different when it comes to policy goals such as Medicare for All and student loan debt forgiveness, as well as a message of revolution and structural change. Here is more propaganda. What the Washington Post is doing, and CNN has done, and MSNBC has done, and frankly, they're just doing what they did in 2016. Remember the lines where they said, Bernie and Hillary, they're not so far apart. There's not that many differences in policy. Now they're trying to do that. Bernie and Elizabeth, two pals from New England, share a common enemy in Wall Street, find themselves more similar than different when it comes to policy goals. No, there is a difference. There is a difference. If asked, and if I got in front of Elizabeth Warren, I certainly would ask, if asked, are you willing to compromise on Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All healthcare plan? If she's being honest, I think she would say yes. If you ask Bernie Sanders, he would say no. Now, if Bernie Sanders were to be elected president, let's be real. Politics is politics. From time to time, Bernie Sanders might have to compromise. But that doesn't mean Bernie Sanders, right after getting elected, right out of the gate, is going to compromise his core convictions. That's why people like Bernie Sanders, because they know he will fight to the deaths politically for what he is proposing. On Elizabeth Warren, people do not know that. Progressives do not know that because she has shown to be a political calculator. She has been someone that is, frankly, willing to play with the establishment. The New York Times, the New York Times story just recently reported she's basically been hobnobbing and having hot tea with leaders of the Democratic establishment. I don't think she's telling them, fuck off, you're going to have to eat your broccoli. Oh, just demonetized. Swear jar. I don't think she's sitting there saying, fuck off. We're going to burn down the house and either get out now or you'll be a dead corpse politically. I don't think so. So when they try to make it seem that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they're just very similar. Their plans are similar. They come from the same school, yada, yada, yada. Well, Bernie Sanders is talking about canceling all student loan debt. I think Elizabeth Warren's plan goes up to $50,000. Bernie Sanders, his Green New Deal plan is $16 trillion. I think Elizabeth Warren's is about $2. Bernie Sanders, I mean, he don't waver on Medicare for all. Elizabeth Warren is for Medicare for all, depending on the day. Some interviews, during the town hall with CNN, she said, let's just get everybody to the table, and there's a lot of different pathways to get there, and yada, yada, yada. No, there's not a lot of different pathways to get there. This is what politicians who are just going with the wind, going with the political wind, that's what politicians going with the political wind say. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.